Jake Morrison sat in his small apartment staring at the beer in his hand. It was 11 at night and he was tired. The factory work always left him exhausted. He built parts for airplanes, same thing every day for the past 5 years. His life was simple and boring, just the way he liked it. The knock on the door surprised him. Nobody visited this late. Jake put down his beer and walked to the door. He looked through the peephole but saw nothing. Another knock came, louder this time. "Who is it?" Jake called out, "It's me, Jake. Please open the door." The voice made his heart stop. He knew that voice, but it couldn't be her. It had been 10 years since he heard it last. His hand shook as he unlocked the door and pulled it open. The woman standing in his doorway was not human. She stood 7 feet tall, her skin glowing with a soft silver-blue light. She wore armor that looked like liquid metal, moving and shifting with each breath. But her eyes, those violet eyes, were the same ones he remembered from college. "Hello, Jake," she said softly. "I missed you. It's time to return." Jake stepped backward, nearly falling over his coffee table. "Lyra, what? How? I'm not human," Lyra finished for him. "I never was. May I come inside? We need to talk, and I don't want your neighbors to see me." Jake nodded, unable to speak. He moved aside and Lyra walked into his apartment. She had to duck her head to fit through the doorway. Once inside, she looked around at his small living space. Photos covered one wall, including several from his college days. There was one of them together at a football game, both smiling. "You kept the photos," Lyra said. "I'm glad. What are you?" Jake finally managed to ask. "Where did you go?" "You just disappeared one day. No call, no message, nothing. I looked for you everywhere." Lyra sat down on his couch, which creaked under her weight. "I'm sorry, Jake. I wanted to stay. I wanted to tell you the truth. But I couldn't. My people forbid contact with species like yours, species like mine." Jake felt anger rising through his shock. "You mean humans?" "Yes, Earth was marked as off-limits by the Galactic Council. Your people weren't ready for contact yet. But I came here anyway 10 years ago. I wanted to understand humanity. My father sent me to study your culture, to see if humans were worth watching." Jake sat down across from her. His mind was racing. Aliens, Galactic Council. This was insane. "So everything was a lie? You were just studying me like some lab rat?" Pain crossed Lyra's face. "No, that part was real." "I fell in love with you, Jake. That was never part of the plan. When my time on Earth ended, they forced me to leave. They tried to erase my memories of you, but it didn't work completely. I never forgot you." "Then why come back now?" Jake asked. "Why after 10 years? Lyra stood up and walked to his window. She looked out at the city lights. "Because my people are dying, Jake. We're at war. We've been fighting for 15 years against an enemy called the Kresh. They don't negotiate. They don't surrender. They only destroy. My father died in battle 6 months ago. Now I'm queen and my empire is losing." She turned back to face him. "I need help. The Galactic Council won't act. The other civilizations are too afraid or too weak. But humans, you're different. You're warriors. You've spent your entire history fighting, adapting, surviving. That's what we need. You want Earth to join your war?" Jake couldn't believe what he was hearing. "I want Earth to join the galaxy," Lyra corrected. "The war comes with it, yes. But also knowledge, technology, and a future among the stars. Your people are ready, Jake. You just don't know it yet." "And what do you want from me?" Jake asked quietly. Lyra walked closer to him. "I want you to come with me. Not just as someone I love, but as a bridge between our peoples. The Valian Empire needs to see that humans are allies worth having. And I need you by my side. I've let alone for 6 months, Jake. I'm tired and I'm scared. I don't want to be alone anymore." Before Jake could respond, a bright light filled his apartment. He ran to the window and looked up. A massive ship hovered above the city, bigger than any building he'd ever seen. Its hull glowed with the same silver-blue light as Lyra's skin. "What is that?" Jake whispered. "My ship, the Starfire's crown. Your military will have detected it by now. We have maybe an hour before they arrive." As if on cue, sirens began wailing across the city. Jake grabbed his phone and saw emergency alerts flooding the screen. "Unidentified craft over Portland. Seek shelter immediately." "I need an answer, Jake," Lyra said. "Come with me to Valia Prime, meet my people. See what we're fighting for. If you decide it's not for you, I'll bring you back. But I need you to try, and if I say no, then I'll leave. I'll offer Earth an alliance anyway because it's the right thing to do, but I'll leave alone and you'll never see me again." Jake looked at this woman, this alien queen who had been his first love. 10 years ago, she broke his heart when she vanished. Now she stood in his apartment asking him to leave Earth, to join an interstellar war, to become part of something he couldn't begin to understand. The rational part of his brain screamed at him to refuse. This was crazy. He had a life here, a family, a job. His sister Amy would be devastated if he left. His friends would think he'd lost his mind. But another part of him, the part that never stopped wondering what happened to Lyra, the part that looked at the stars and wished for something more, that part was already decided. I need to call my sister, Jake said. I need to tell her something. Then I need a few days to think about this. You have 72 hours, Lyra said. After that, I must leave. The creche will track me here eventually, and I won't put Earth in danger. Loud banging came from the door. This is the United States military. Open the door immediately. Lyra looked at Jake. You should let them in. They'll want answers. So will your government. This is humanity's first contact with alien life, Jake. What happens next will change everything. Jake walked to the door and opened it. Soldiers rushed in, weapons raised. An officer pushed past them, staring at Lyra in shock. I am Queen Lyra Shan of the Valian Empire, Lyra said calmly. I come in peace, seeking alliance with humanity. Take me to your leaders. We have much to discuss. As soldiers surrounded them both, Jake caught Lyra's eye. She smiled at him, that same smile he remembered from 10 years ago. Despite everything, despite the weapons and the fear and the impossible situation, he felt something he hadn't felt in years. Hope. The next 3 days would decide the fate of humanity. And somehow Jake Morrison, a factory worker from Portland, stood at the center of it all. His quiet, boring life was over. The stars were calling, and he had to decide if he would answer. The next morning, Jake woke up in a military base. They had taken him and Lyra in separate vehicles to a location outside the city. Nobody told him where they were, but he guessed somewhere in the mountains. His room was comfortable but locked from the outside. A guard stood by his door. Around noon, an officer came to get him. The woman introduced herself as General Hayes. She was in her 50s with gray hair and sharp eyes that seemed to see right through him. Mr. Morrison, you're not under arrest, she said as they walked through gray corridors. But you're the only human who knows this alien personally. We need your help. They entered a large room filled with screens and people in military uniforms. Scientists in lab coats stood in one corner arguing about something. On the biggest screen, Lyra sat in what looked like an interrogation room. She appeared calm, almost bored. She's been very cooperative, General Hayes said. She's answered every question, shown us star maps, explained their technology. Even given us information about this war, she mentioned. The problem is we don't know if we can trust her. You can, Jake said without thinking. She wouldn't lie about something this important. You knew her for 1 year, 10 years ago. People change. Aliens might be even less predictable. Jake watched Lyra on the screen. What does she want? She wants Earth to join something called the Galactic Council. She wants us to ally with her empire against this enemy species. And she wants you specifically to go with her to her homeworld. Has anyone else seen her ship? General Hayes nodded. It's still hovering over Portland. We've sent drones to study it. The technology is beyond anything we have. One of our scientists said it would take us 500 years to build something like that. So why not accept her offer? Jake asked. She's offering to share technology, right? She's also offering to drag us into a war that's been going for 15 years. A war where billions have died. Mr. Morrison, do you understand what that means? We'd be sending our soldiers to die in space for aliens we just met. Before Jake could respond, alarms blared throughout the facility. Red lights flashed on the walls. A young officer ran up to General Hayes. Ma'am, 3 unidentified ships just appeared near Mars. They're massive, each over 5 miles long. They're heading toward Earth. Everyone in the room froze. On the screens, new images appeared showing 3 enormous vessels shaped like twisted insects. They were dark red and seemed to be made of organic material rather than metal. Get the alien here now, General Hayes ordered. 2 minutes later, Lyra entered the room. She looked at the screens and her expression turned to stone. Creche warships. They tracked me here. I'm sorry, I didn't think they'd find me so quickly. What do they want? General Hayes demanded to kill me, and to make sure Earth rejects my offer. They'll threaten to destroy your planet if you ally with us. Can they do that? Yes, each of those ships carries enough weapons to burn your continents. They won't do it immediately. They'll give you a choice first. Refuse my alliance or die. The room erupted in chaos. People shouted questions. Scientists argued about evacuation plans. General Hayes held up her hand for silence. "Can your ship stop them?" she asked Lyra. "I can try. The Starfire's crown is a royal dreadnought, one of the most powerful ships in my fleet. But 3 Kresh warships working together? The odds are not good. What are our odds if we help?" Jake found himself asking. Everyone looked at him. Lyra smiled slightly. "Better. Not good, but better. Earth has weapons I've seen in your news. Missiles, lasers, railguns. They're primitive by galactic standards, but the Kresh won't expect them. Surprise might make the difference." General Hayes pulled out her phone and made a call. Jake heard her say "Mr. President," and then she walked away, speaking quickly and quietly. Lyra approached Jake. Guards tensed, hands moving to their weapons, but she ignored them. "I'm sorry I brought this to your world. You said the Kresh don't stop. If they're here now, they would have come eventually anyway, right? Yes, Earth is in a strategic location. Once they finish with the Valian Empire, they would turn here next. Maybe in 20 years, maybe 50. But they would come. Then we might as well fight now while we have allies." General Hayes returned. "The President is addressing Congress in 1 hour. The United Nations is holding an emergency session. But that will take days to organize a response. Those ships will be here in 8 hours. What do we do right now?" "Right now?" Lyra looked at the screen showing the approaching Kresh fleet. "Right now, I go out there and buy Earth as much time as I can. If I die, tell Jake I'm sorry. Tell him everything I said was true." She turned to leave, but Jake grabbed her arm. "Wait, you said we'd have better odds fighting together, so let's fight together. Jake, your people aren't ready. You don't have shields, you don't have quantum drives. One good hit and your ships are gone." "Then we don't get hit." Jake looked at General Hayes. "You have experimental weapons, right? Things you've been developing but never tested in real combat?" The general hesitated. "Some. Project Thunderbolt, a railgun system that uses electromagnets to fire projectiles at extreme speeds. Project Skyfire, a network of orbital lasers. And Project Hammer, kinetic satellites designed to drop tungsten rods on targets." "None of those were designed for space combat," a scientist protested. "No," Jake agreed. "But they're what we have. And if the Kresh don't expect them, they might work anyway." Lyra looked at him with something like pride in her eyes. "That's very human thinking. Improvise with what you have and hope for the best." "It's kept us alive this long," Jake said. General Hayes made another call. This one was longer, with more arguing. Finally, she nodded and hung up. "The President authorized it. We'll coordinate with your ship, Queen Lyra Shawn. If we're doing this, we do it together." The next few hours passed in a blur. Jake watched as humanity prepared for its first space battle. Around the world, secret weapons came online. Orbital platforms that were supposed to be weather satellites revealed hidden laser arrays. Underground silos opened, revealing missiles with experimental warheads. And in the Pacific Ocean, a massive railgun that was disguised as an offshore oil platform began charging up. Lyra returned to her ship. Jake watched her leave, wondering if he'd ever see her again. She paused at the door and looked back at him. "Come with me," she said suddenly. "What?" "Come to my ship. If I'm going to die today, I want you there. I want to know that for a few more hours I wasn't alone." Jake looked at General Hayes. She shook her head. "Absolutely not." "You're a civilian, Mr. Morrison." "A civilian who's the only human that Alien trusts completely," Jake countered. "And maybe the only human who believes she's worth fighting for." "Let me go." The general stared at him for a long moment. Then she sighed. "If you die up there, your sister will kill me. Go." Jake and Lyra took a small shuttle up to the Starfire's crown. When Jake stepped aboard, his breath caught in his throat. The interior was beautiful, all flowing curves and soft light. Crew members stopped and stared at him. The first human aboard a Valian ship. Lyra led him to the command center. It was a circular room with a holographic display in the center, showing Earth and the approaching Kresh fleet. Valian officers stood at various stations, their hands moving through holographic controls. "Attention," Lyra called out. "This is Jake Morrison of Earth. He's here as observer and liaison with the human forces. Treat him with respect." The Kresh fleet entered Earth's orbit. They were even more terrifying up close, their hulls pulsing like living things. A message came through in a language Jake didn't understand, but Lyra translated. "They say Earth must refuse alliance with the Valian Empire. They say any world that sides with us will be destroyed. They're giving humanity 1 hour to decide." They're going to get their answer early, Jake said, watching the display. On Earth, he saw hundreds of launch signatures, missiles rising from every continent, laser arrays powering up, the railgun firing its first shot. The battle began. Lyra's ship moved with impossible grace, dodging Kresh weapons that moved at incredible speeds. Its own weapons fired beams of pure energy that cut through space. The Kresh ships returned fire, and Jake watched in horror as explosions bloomed in Earth's orbit. Then Earth's weapons arrived. Missiles struck Kresh shields, barely scratching them. But the railgun projectile, moving at incredible speed, punched through one ship's defenses. Alarms wailed aboard the Kresh vessel. They weren't ready for kinetic weapons, Lyra said with surprise. They rely on energy shields. Physical projectiles can slip through. She immediately adjusted tactics, focusing her ship's fire on the damaged Kresh vessel, while Earth's weapons continued their assault. More railgun shots, more missiles, laser beams from orbit that, while weak individually, added up when fired from hundreds of satellites. The first Kresh ship exploded. Jake cheered along with Lyra's crew, but there were still 2 more enemy ships and the Starfire's crown was taking damage. Alerts flashed across the holographic displays. "We can't take much more," Lyra's first officer reported. Jake looked at Earth below, at his home. He thought about Amy, his friends, everyone he loved down there. He thought about Lyra beside him, fighting for her people and now for his too. "We don't give up," he said firmly. "Tell your people to target the lead Kresh ship. Tell Earth to concentrate everything on it. We hurt them. Let's hurt them more." Lyra smiled at him and gave the order. For the next hour, humans and Valians fought side by side, and slowly, impossibly, they began to win. 3 weeks later, Jake stood at the window of his quarters aboard the Starfire's crown, watching stars blur past at impossible speeds. After the battle, Earth had voted. 147 countries chose to join the galactic community. 53 voted against it, but they were outvoted. Jake had agreed to go with Lyra. His sister Amy had cried when he told her. She made him promise to come back and visit. His friends thought he was insane. But deep down, Jake knew this was what he wanted. The stars had always called to him. Now he was answering. He wasn't alone. 30 other humans came with him. Scientists, soldiers, diplomats, and doctors. Dr. Lisa Chang led the science team. She was a biologist who specialized in studying life on other planets, even though she'd never actually seen any aliens until 3 weeks ago. Admiral Cole commanded the military advisors, 10 officers who would learn Valian combat tactics. And there was Colonel Ryan Foster, who had fired the first railgun shot that turned the battle. The journey took 3 weeks through something Lyra called quantum slip space. Jake didn't understand the science. He just knew that space folded somehow, and distances that should take years only took weeks. During the trip, Lyra taught him about her people. The Valian Empire was 40,000 years old. They controlled 2,400 star systems with a population of 320 billion. They valued honor, art, and tactical brilliance. Their culture reminded Jake of a mix between ancient Rome and feudal Japan. She also taught him about the war. The Kresh Dominion was a hive mind. Every Kresh was connected to queen nodes, which were connected to an empress. They thought as one, moved as one, fought as one. They didn't see other species as equals. They saw them as resources or obstacles. Why did the war start? Jake asked one evening as they ate dinner in Lyra's quarters. Territory, like most wars. The Kresh wanted to expand into Valian space. We refused. They attacked. We fought back. 15 years later, we're still fighting. Has anyone tried to negotiate? You can't negotiate with a hive mind that sees you as inferior. The Kresh don't want peace. They want submission or extinction. Jake thought about that. On Earth, wars eventually ended. People got tired of fighting. Treaties were signed. But how do you end a war with an enemy that never gets tired, never doubts, and never compromises? On the 21st day, Lyra came to get him. We're approaching Velia Prime. You should see this. Jake followed her to the command center. Through the main view screen, he saw 2 suns, one blue and one yellow, orbiting each other. Around them were planets, moons, and orbital platforms the size of cities. And on the 3rd planet, Jake saw something that made his jaw drop. Cities that reached into the clouds, elegant spires made of crystal and metal, massive bridges connecting continents, gardens floating in the sky on anti-gravity platforms. It was the most beautiful thing Jake had ever seen, but he also saw the scars, damaged orbital stations, Empty spaces where structures used to be, memorial gardens visible from space, glowing with soft light, each one dedicated to worlds lost in the war. "Your home is beautiful," Jake said quietly. "It used to be more beautiful," Lyra replied. "War takes something from even the places it doesn't reach." The ship descended toward the capital city. As they got closer, Jake saw crowds gathered. Millions of Valians lining the streets, all staring up at the sky. News of the Queen's return with human allies had spread across the Empire. They landed in a massive spaceport. When the door opened and Jake stepped out, the crowd's reaction split. Some cheered. Others looked confused or angry. Jake heard arguments breaking out in the alien language he couldn't understand yet. "They're debating whether you're a good idea," Lyra translated with a small smile. "Some see humans as the young warriors who helped me survive. Others see you as primitives who don't belong here." "What do you see?" Jake asked. "I see hope." A delegation waited for them at the landing pad. The leader was an old Valian man with silver hair and robes covered in metals. He bowed to Lyra, but his eyes kept drifting to Jake and the other humans. "High Chancellor Tornvel," Lyra introduced. "My most trusted advisor. He'll help you navigate our political system." Tornvel spoke in English, his accent thick but understandable. "Welcome to Valia Prime, humans. Your presence here is unprecedented. Try not to cause an incident." "We'll do our best," Jake replied. The next few days were overwhelming. Jake and the other humans were given quarters in the royal palace. The building was enormous, more like a small city than a house. Everything was scaled for people 7 feet tall, so Jake constantly felt like a child in an adult's world. The Valian court was complicated. Nobles competed for influence. Military officers demanded resources for the war. Scientists wanted funding for new weapons. And everyone had an opinion about the humans. Jake quickly learned that politics were the same everywhere, even on alien worlds. The other humans spread out to their assigned roles. Dr. Chang began studying Valian biology to find out if human medicine would work on aliens, and vice versa. She discovered that Valians and humans were remarkably similar on a cellular level, suggesting they might share a common ancestor billions of years ago. Admiral Cole met with General Kelthos, the supreme military commander. Kelthos was a warrior who had been fighting for 20 years. He respected strength and despised weakness. At first he saw humans as too small, too fragile, too primitive, but Admiral Cole challenged him to tactical simulations, and slowly, Kelthos began to see humans differently. Colonel Foster worked with Valian engineers, sharing information about Earth's weapons. The Valians were fascinated by kinetic weapons. They had focused so much on energy weapons that they'd forgotten the simple effectiveness of throwing things very fast. Jake's role was harder to define. Officially, he was Earth's ambassador. Unofficially, he was Lyra's partner. The Valian nobles didn't know how to treat him. Was he royalty? Was he a pet? Was he a symbol? One noble in particular caused problems. Lady Siraven was beautiful, powerful, and had expected to become queen consort before Jake appeared. She made her contempt clear at every court gathering. "Tell me, human," she said at one dinner, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "What exactly are your qualifications? Besides being the queen's what is the human word? Boyfriend?" "I helped save her life during the battle at Earth," Jake replied calmly. "I helped convince my people to join your war, and I love her. Are those qualifications enough?" The table went silent. Siraven glared at him but said nothing. Lyra squeezed his hand under the table. 2 months after their arrival, Jake was invited to attend a war council. The Valian military leadership gathered in a huge room with holographic displays, showing the entire warfront. Jake listened as they discussed strategies, resource allocation, and casualty reports. The numbers were staggering. The Empire was losing this war. Slowly but definitely. "We need a new approach," General Kelthos said. "The Kresh adapt to our tactics. Every time we develop a new strategy, they counter it within months." "Maybe that's the problem," Jake spoke up. Everyone turned to look at him. He felt like an insect under a microscope but continued. "You said the Kresh are a hive mind. They think as one, move as one. That's their strength, but it's also a weakness." "Explain," Kelthos demanded. "They're predictable. Humans aren't. We spent 10,000 years fighting each other. Every war taught us something new. We learned to improvise, to adapt, to be unpredictable. That's not something you can program into a hive mind. The room remained silent. Then one of the Valian admirals spoke. He's not wrong. The Kresh fight flawlessly, but they fight the same way every time. They've been using the same basic tactics for the entire war. Prove it, Kael'thas said to Jake. There's a tactical simulator. Show me how humans would fight differently. For the next hour, Jake worked with Admiral Cole and Colonel Foster. They took a battle the Valians had lost badly 6 months ago and redesigned the approach. They added false retreats, feints, random movements that made no sense. They divided forces in ways that broke every logical tactical rule. The simulation ran. The Valian commanders watched as the human strategy worked. The random movements confused the Kresh. The false retreats drew them into traps. The divided forces struck from unexpected angles. The simulated battle ended in a decisive victory. General Kael'thas stared at the results in disbelief. Your species has spent 10,000 years perfecting the art of killing each other. Perhaps that's exactly what we need. That night, Lyra held an official ceremony. Jake and Lyra stood before thousands in the Grand Celestial Hall. The ceremony was part wedding, part political statement. Jake wore a mixture of human formal wear and Valian ceremonial armor. Lyra looked radiant in traditional robes that glowed with natural bioluminescence. When it came time for vows, Jake spoke not just to Lyra but to all the Valians watching. I'm not here to replace your traditions or change your culture. I'm here to stand beside your queen, to bring my people's strength to yours, to build a future where both humans and Valians can thrive together. We're different, yes. But those differences make us stronger. The crowd's response was mixed. Some cheered. Others remained silent. But Jake saw something change in their eyes. He wasn't just the queen's strange choice anymore. He was becoming something more. A symbol of what two species could accomplish together. After the ceremony, Jake and Lyra stood on a balcony overlooking the capital city. The light stretched to the horizon, beautiful and peaceful despite the war raging among the stars. Do you regret coming? Lyra asked softly. Jake thought about Earth, about Amy, about everything he left behind. Then he looked at Lyra and at the alien sky above them. No, he said honestly. This is where I'm supposed to be. 6 months after Jake arrived on Valia Prime, Earth sent its first battle fleet to join the war. 50 ships left Earth's orbit, each one a converted cargo vessel fitted with Valian weapons and quantum drives. They weren't beautiful or elegant like Valian ships. They were blocky, practical, and built with human stubbornness. Admiral Cole commanded the human fleet. His flagship was called the Liberty, and Jake stood on its bridge as it prepared to join 300 Valian warships for a major offensive. Their target was Vexnar, a Kresh world that served as a supply hub. Take it out, and Kresh operations in 3 sectors would collapse. You don't have to come, Lyra had said when Jake volunteered to go. You're an ambassador, not a soldier. I'm the bridge between our peoples, Jake replied. If humans and Valians are going to fight together, I need to be there. I need to see it work. The battle plan was revolutionary for the Valians. Instead of the direct assault they normally preferred, the humans suggested misdirection. They would fake a frontal assault on Vexnar's orbital defenses while a strike team infiltrated the planet's surface. Their mission was to destroy the Queen node controlling Kresh forces in that sector. General Kael'thas commanded the Valian fleet from his flagship. Despite his initial doubts about humans, he'd become their strongest supporter after the successful tactical simulations. He trusted human unpredictability now. The fleet jumped to Vexnar. The Kresh were waiting. 200 warships orbited the planet, and its surface bristled with weapons. The odds were bad, but that was normal for this war. All ships begin the assault, Kael'thas ordered. The Valian and human fleets charged toward the Kresh defenses. Weapons fire filled space. Ships on both sides exploded. Jake watched from the Liberty's bridge as young men and women died following orders he'd helped plan. It made him sick. They're repositioning, Admiral Cole reported. The Kresh are moving forces to counter our assault. The strike team's path is opening. On Vexnar's surface, a small ship dropped through the atmosphere undetected. Inside were 20 soldiers, 10 human and 10 Valian. Leading them was Lieutenant Kelly Cruz, a Navy SEAL who'd volunteered for this insane mission. With her was Rindal, a Valian shadow commander who specialized in impossible operations. Jake watched through a video feed as they landed in a Kresh-controlled zone. The landscape was nightmarish. Kresh didn't build structures like other species. They grew them. Everything was organic, pulsing, alive in a way that made Jake's skin crawl. "Strike team to Fleet Command," Lieutenant Cruz reported. "We're on the ground. Beginning infiltration." The team moved through twisted corridors made of hardened biological material. They encountered Kresh biosoldiers, creatures that used to be other species before the Kresh captured and transformed them into weapons. The humans and Valians fought side by side, covering each other, adapting to each other's tactics. "I see why you kept fighting each other for so long," Rindal commented after they cleared a room. "You're quite good at violence." "We're good at surviving," Lieutenant Cruz corrected. "Violence is just a tool." They reached the chamber housing the Queen node. It was a massive organic structure, part computer and part living creature. Destroying it would sever the Kresh hive-mind connection for thousands of ships and millions of soldiers. But the Kresh knew they were there. Biosoldiers flooded the chamber. The firefight was brutal. Jake watched helplessly as soldiers on both sides fell. A human private named Danny got caught by a biosoldier and torn apart before anyone could help him. A Valian warrior named Torseth died holding a doorway so others could advance. Lieutenant Cruz took a hit that destroyed her left arm. She screamed but kept fighting, using her remaining hand to arm the quantum charge that would destroy the Queen node. "Charge is set," she gasped. 30 seconds to detonation. "Everyone out." Rindal grabbed her and ran. The team sprinted for the exit as the countdown continued. They were 5 seconds from safety when a biosoldier blocked their path. Without hesitation, a human corpsman named Pete threw himself at the creature, giving the others time to escape. The explosion vaporized everything within a mile. The strike team's ship barely got clear in time. On the Liberty, Jake watched Lieutenant Cruz collapse on the shuttle floor, bleeding badly despite the Valian medical technology keeping her alive. Above Vexnar, the Kresh fleet suddenly lost coordination. Ships drifted, responses slowed, formations fell apart. The Queen node was gone and the hive mind was severed. "All ships press the attack," General Kael'thos ordered. The combined human and Valian fleet tore through the confused Kresh forces. For the first time in 3 years, the Valians won a major battle decisively. Vexnar fell. Kresh supply lines collapsed. But the victory felt hollow to Jake. He stood in the medical bay watching doctors work on Lieutenant Cruz. She'd lost her arm despite all their advanced technology. 3 other humans and 5 Valians from the strike team were dead. Pete, who threw himself at the biosoldier, received a posthumous medal. His body would be sent home to Earth with full military honors. "We won," Admiral Cole said, standing beside Jake. "It cost, but we won." "How many more victories like this can we afford?" Jake asked quietly. "As many as it takes." That night, Jake couldn't sleep. He kept seeing Pete's sacrifice, kept hearing Lieutenant Cruz's scream, kept thinking about Danny being torn apart. These were his people dying because of decisions he'd influenced. The weight of it crushed him. Lyra found him alone in their quarters, staring at casualty reports. She sat beside him without speaking for a long time. "I got them killed," Jake finally said. "No. The Kresh got them killed. You gave them a chance to fight effectively. Without that plan, we would have lost Vexnar and thousands more would have died. Does that make it better?" "No, but it makes it necessary." Lyra took his hand. "This is the burden of leadership, Jake. Every decision costs lives. The question is whether the alternative costs more. You're learning what I learned when I became queen. Command means carrying the weight of other people's deaths and still making the hard choices." Jake wanted to argue, but he knew she was right. War wasn't glorious or clean. It was math. Calculating which deaths served a purpose and which ones were wasted. He hated it. News of Vexnar spread across both civilizations. On Valia Prime, people celebrated the first major victory in years. On Earth, the media showed footage of human and Valian soldiers fighting together. The human ships might have been crude, but they'd proven themselves in combat. However, not everyone on Earth was happy. Jake received a message from Amy. His sister had been attacked by protesters who blamed him for dragging Earth into an alien war. She was okay, just shaken, but it made Jake realize the cost wasn't just in space. "I need to go back to Earth," Jake told Lyra. "Just for a few days. I need to see Amy. I need to address these concerns." "There's a war council in 3 days," Lyra said. "The Kresh are planning a counterattack. I need you here. My sister was attacked because of choices I made. I need to go." Lyra looked at him for a long moment. Then she made a decision. We'll both go. Earth deserves to hear from me directly, and I won't let you face this alone. 2 days later, Lyra's ship arrived at Earth. The visit was kept quiet, but word leaked anyway. Protesters gathered outside the United Nations building where Jake was scheduled to speak. They held signs saying Earth first and not our war and bring our children home. Jake stood at the podium looking at representatives from nations around the world. He thought about what to say, how to make them understand. I know you're afraid, he began. I know you didn't ask for this war. Neither did I. 6 months ago, I was just a factory worker in Portland. Then the woman I loved showed up at my door, except she wasn't human and she needed help. He paused, gathering his thoughts. We're in a fight for survival. Not just for Valians or humans, but for everyone. The Kresh don't negotiate. They don't compromise. If we hadn't stood with the Valians, we'd be fighting alone in 20 or 30 years, facing an enemy even stronger than they are now. I've seen the cost. I've watched good people die. I've seen my sister attacked by people who are angry and scared. I understand that anger, but I've also seen what we can accomplish together. At Vexnar, humans and Valians fought side by side. We won because we combined their experience with our unpredictability. We won because two species that should never have met learned to trust each other. The price is high. I won't pretend otherwise. But the alternative is extinction. Not just for Earth, but for everyone who isn't Kresh, so I'm asking you to trust me. Trust that the sacrifices we're making now will save lives in the future. Trust that we're stronger together than we ever could be alone. The speech helped, but Jake knew it wasn't enough. Politics on Earth were fragile. Public opinion could turn against the war at any moment. As he left the building, he saw protesters and supporters facing each other across police barricades. The divide was growing that night. Back aboard Lyra's ship preparing to return to Valia Prime, Jake sat with Amy. She had a black eye from the attack but insisted she was fine. I don't blame you, she said. Those people are idiots. But Jake, I'm scared. What if you don't come back? Then you tell everyone that I died doing something that mattered. That's all anyone can hope for, Amy hugged him tight. Just try not to die, okay? I'm not ready to lose my brother. 3 weeks after returning from Earth, Jake sat in an emergency war council. The news was the worst possible. Intelligence had confirmed that the Kresh had activated something called a stellar converter, an ancient weapon from a dead civilization. What does it do? Jake asked, though he already feared the answer. It destabilizes stars. General Kael'thas explained grimly. The Kresh plan to use it on Valia Prime's binary suns. When they explode, everything in this system dies. 40 billion people. The room fell silent. Jake felt sick. 40 billion. That number was too big to comprehend. On Earth, the entire population was only 8 billion. This was 5 Earths worth of people about to be murdered. Can we evacuate? Someone asked. Not 40 billion people. Not in time. Maybe we could save a few million if we had months. We have days at best. Lyra sat at the head of the table, her face pale. She'd been queen for less than a year, and now she faced the extinction of her people. Jake wanted to comfort her, but what could he say? There were no good options. Where is this weapon? Admiral Cole asked. A holographic display appeared showing a massive structure the size of Earth's moon. Around it orbited 2,000 Kresh warships, the largest fleet they'd ever assembled. We can't fight through that, a Valian admiral said. We'd need 5,000 ships to have a chance. We barely have 1,200 and half are damaged from recent battles. Then we evacuate who we can, another voice suggested. Save the children at least. Preserve what remains of our culture. Jake listened to them debate, his mind racing. There had to be a way. There was always a way. Humans had survived ice ages, plagues, world wars, and nuclear weapons. They survived because they refused to give up, refused to accept that some problems had no solutions. We're thinking about this wrong, Jake said suddenly. Everyone looked at him. We don't need to destroy their entire fleet. We just need to destroy the converter. The converter is inside that fortress, General Kael'thas pointed out, protected by 2,000 ships and defensive systems that could shred anything we send. Not anything. Jake stood up and walked to the holographic display. Dr. Webb has been working on an improved cloaking system, a single-use technology that could hide a small ship long enough to get through their defenses. And then what? Lyra asked. Even if a ship got inside, the converter is massive. It would take hundreds of bombs to destroy it. Not hundreds, just one, if it's big enough. Jake took a breath, knowing what he was about to propose. The Valians developed nova bombs 20 years ago but never used them. They create a miniature supernova that destroys everything within 50,000 kilometers. The room erupted in protest. Nova bombs were banned by galactic law. They were weapons of last resort, too destructive, too indiscriminate. The crew wouldn't survive, High Chancellor Tornville said quietly. The ship couldn't escape the blast radius in time. You're proposing a suicide mission? Yes, Jake said simply. Because 40 billion lives are worth it. Lyra stood up, her voice sharp. No, absolutely not. I won't authorize this. It's not your decision alone, General Kelthos said. The military council has authority during existential threats. I vote yes, other voices joined in. Some voted yes. Some voted no. The debate raged for hours. Finally, they took a formal vote. The result, 13 in favor, 9 against. The mission was authorized. I volunteer to lead it, Jake said immediately. No, Lyra's shout echoed through the chamber. I forbid it. You're not a soldier. You're not expendable. Everyone is expendable when 40 billion lives are at stake, Jake replied gently. And I'm the right choice. I understand both human and Valian tactics. I can coordinate a mixed crew. And honestly, Lyra, this is what you brought humans here to do. We don't give up. We don't surrender. And when necessary, we sacrifice everything. They argued for another hour, but Jake's mind was made up. Finally, Lyra stopped arguing. She just looked at him with tears in her eyes. I can't lose you. Not after I just found you again. You won't lose me. You'll carry me with you forever. Jake wiped away her tears. This is the only way. The call for volunteers went out. They needed 15 people for the mission. Pilots, engineers, soldiers, and a demolitions expert. Jake expected maybe 50 volunteers. He got thousands from both species. He chose carefully. Captain Danny Wright, a human pilot who'd survived 3 major battles. Lieutenant Kelly Cruz, who'd lost her arm at Vexnar but insisted she could still fight. Commander Rindal, the Valian warrior who'd fought beside Cruz. Techmaster Lorson, a Valian engineer who understood Nova bomb mechanics. And Dr. Webb himself, who refused to let anyone else arm his cloaking device. The ship they chose was an old human cargo vessel called Defiance. It wasn't fast or elegant, but it was sturdy and had enough cargo space for the Nova bomb. The night before the mission, Jake spent his final hours with Lyra. They didn't talk much. Words felt inadequate. They just held each other, memorizing every moment. If you find a way to survive, take it, Lyra whispered. Please, I will. But Lyra, if I don't make it back, promise me something. Don't let this break you. Keep fighting. Keep building the future we talked about. Make sure humans and Valians stay together. I promise. Jake also sent messages to Earth. To Amy, he said goodbye and told her he was proud of her. To his old friends, he thanked them for the good years. To humanity, he asked them to keep supporting the Alliance. We're stronger together, he recorded. Never forget that. The next morning, the Defiance launched. Captain Wright piloted them toward the Kresh fleet while Dr. Webb activated the cloaking system. On every ship in the Valian and human fleets, crews watched in silence. They knew 15 people were about to die to save 40 billion. The cloak worked. The Defiance slipped past Kresh patrols like a ghost. Jake stood on the small bridge, watching proximity alerts as they navigated through the enemy fleet. One mistake, one sensor ping, and they'd be destroyed instantly. They reached the fortress and docked on an uninhabited section. The team split into 2 groups. One stayed with the ship to guard their escape route. The other, led by Jake, entered the fortress carrying the Nova bomb. Inside was like walking through a nightmare. Everything was organic, pulsing alive. The walls seemed to breathe. Sounds echoed that weren't quite mechanical and weren't quite biological. They encountered Kresh bio-soldiers. The creatures had been other species once, now twisted into weapons. The team fought through them, losing people along the way. A human marine named Tony died saving Dr. Webb from a bio-soldier. A Valian engineer named Krelvan was torn apart holding a doorway. They finally reached the converter chamber. It was massive, a structure of twisted metal and organic tissue that seemed to be growing as it charged. According to the readings, it would fire in 6 hours. Set up the bomb, Jake ordered. Techmaster Lorson and Dr. Webb worked together, Valian and human engineering combining to arm the most destructive weapon either species had ever created. Lieutenant Cruz and the remaining soldiers established a perimeter. Then the Kresh found them. Alarms wailed throughout the fortress. Bio-soldiers flooded the chamber from every entrance. The firefight was desperate and brutal. Commander Rindal died holding the north entrance. 3 human soldiers fell defending the bomb. Lieutenant Cruz, fighting with one arm and prosthetic, killed 8 bio-soldiers before one finally brought her down. "Bomb is armed," Dr. Webb reported, bleeding from multiple wounds. "But the timer is damaged. Someone needs to stay and manually detonate it." Everyone looked at Jake. He'd known it might come to this. He looked at his remaining crew, 5 people out of the original 15. "Get back to the ship." "That's an order. Tell Lyra I'm sorry. Tell Earth they mattered." "Sir, I can stay," Captain Wright protested. "No. Your job is to get them home and tell everyone what happened here." Jake pulled out his detonator. "Now go," they ran. Jake stood alone in the chamber, surrounded by the bodies of people who'd followed him into this nightmare. He could hear more bio-soldiers coming. The converter continued charging, reality itself seeming to warp around it. Aboard the Starfire's crown, Lyra watched through a video feed Jake had left active. She screamed his name, begging him to run to find another way. But there was no other way. "Lyra, I love you," Jake said, looking at the camera. "I never imagined this life, but I wouldn't change it. You gave me purpose. You showed me that humans could be more than we thought we were." He looked up at the converter. "Tell my people that humans don't break. We never break, and when we find something worth dying for, we do it without hesitation." Jake pressed the detonator. The Nova bomb exploded. White fire consumed the fortress, the converter, and 300 Kresh ships that were too close to escape. The blast was visible from Velia Prime, a new star burning briefly in the sky. The Kresh fleet broke immediately. Their superweapon was gone. Their fortress was destroyed. For the first time in 15 years, the Kresh retreated in full disorder. General Kael'thas didn't give them time to recover. The combined Valian and human fleets pursued relentlessly. Over the next 3 weeks, they pushed the Kresh back to their own territory. The Galactic Council finally intervened, establishing a demilitarized zone and negotiating a ceasefire. The war wasn't over completely. Skirmishes would continue for years. But the existential threat was gone. Velia Prime was saved. 40 billion people lived because 15 people died. Lyra addressed both civilizations from the Grand Celestial Hall. Billions watched across human and Valian worlds. "Today we mourn 15 heroes," she began, her voice steady despite the tears on her face. "They came from 2 species. They spoke different languages. They looked different, thought different, lived different lives. But they died together, fighting for something bigger than themselves." She paused, looking directly at the camera. "Jake Morrison taught me something in the short time we had together. He taught me that strength comes in many forms. That courage isn't about not being afraid. It's about doing what's necessary despite fear, and that love, true love, transcends everything we think divides us. Humanity taught us that hope endures, that even facing impossible odds you fight, you adapt, you survive, and most importantly, you never give up on each other. Today we are not just allies. We are one people. Humans and Valians together building a future where both our species can thrive. That future cost us dearly. But because of Jake and the others who died with him, that future exists. A memorial was built on Velia Prime. A massive structure showing a human and a Valian standing together, reaching toward the stars. Jake's name was carved first, followed by every human and Valian who died in the war. On Earth, Amy Morrison became humanity's ambassador to Velia Prime. In her first speech to the Valian court, she shared Jake's final message. "My brother said humans don't break," she told them, her voice strong. "Today I'd add that when we find others who share that spirit, we become unbreakable together. Jake gave his life so both our peoples could survive. Let's make sure that sacrifice meant something." 3 years later, Lyra visited Earth. She walked through Portland, following the path she'd taken as a student 15 years ago. She stopped at Jake's old apartment building. It had been preserved as a historical site, the place where first contact happened. Inside his old apartment, she found a box Jake had left behind. Letters he'd written during college addressed to the girl who changed everything but never sent. Lyra read them, tears falling freely. In them, Jake wrote about his dreams of seeing the stars, of finding his place in the universe, of meeting someone who understood him completely. "You found me again," Lyra whispered to the empty room. "And because of you, both our peoples found themselves." She looked up at the sky where human and Valian ships patrolled together. Two species that should never have met were building something neither could have built alone. Jake Morrison had been right. Humans don't break, and when they find something worth fighting for, worth dying for, they give everything they have. The stars had called and humanity answered. The cost was high, but the future they built together made every sacrifice worthwhile.